And I did say a 7:03 start, and here we are at 7:03. So welcome, everybody. My name is David DiGiovanni. I'm the Artistic Director of Shakespeare in Action. Welcome to Going Solo, an illustrated lecture with Alon Nashman. Folks may be joining as this lecture happens, but I just wanted to cover just a bit of Zoom protocol before I hand it over to Alon. First things first, all of you are muted. Thank you so much. We invite you to stay muted. If we hear, household noises in the background, we may mute you, and we'll ask you if we mute you to unmute yourself, especially if you have a question. Speaking of which, there will be a couple of times throughout the lecture that Alon's going to open it up to questions. Feel free to type questions in the chat as Alon is talking, or save your question for when Alon asks if you have any questions. And feel free to be on mic if you'd like to. If you don't want to be on mic, I am going to be collecting questions that occur in the chat. And in those question periods, I'll be sharing them with Alon as well. As I mentioned before, you're welcome to be on video, off video. You're welcome to be both on and off video throughout this. Sometimes I get tired of being on video, and then I get my energy back. So please feel free. We all know what it's like maybe to perform to an, online void. So the folks who are on video, thank you so much. It's just great to see those faces. Thank you so much. I think that about covers it. There will be questions throughout and then questions at the end as well. Alon will be sharing some videos. Without further ado, Alon, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, David. This is a first for me. I have not made a speech on Zoom. I have not made a speech about creating solo shows before. So there's a lot of new and a lot of exciting for me because I'm going to tell you a lot about projects that are very close to my heart. But first, we begin with land acknowledgements at gatherings, and this is a strange kind of circle. But nonetheless, I think it's particularly important now when it feels as though we are living in virtual space, divorced from a specific place, from the earth under our feet, that it's necessary to reassert that we have a relationship with here and now, that sunrise and sunset and the phases of the moon and that sort of thing makes a difference in our lives. And it's actually, I think, incumbent upon theater artists to remind the societies that we live in that there is such a thing as shared space, gathering, breathing together, even if it's not safe to do so at this instant. So I acknowledge that the land beneath my feet here in downtown Toronto was known by many names before, including Tikaronto, a Mohawk word meaning where there are trees standing in the water. Many peoples have inhabited and cared for this place, including the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga of the Credit River. We acknowledge their stewardship and vision. Another reason to acknowledge the peoples of this place and to learn from their example of living in harmony with the land is that in this era of COVID, our capacity to tell stories, let's face it, is going to open outdoors long before indoors. Outside performances in harmony with the land and with the elements is part of the new abnormal. So all the more reason to embrace the specificity of the place that we are in. Where are you? I don't even know where people are joining us from. Could you just throw your location to the chat, and we'll just see how far this this web is woven. Yeah, great. Calgary. I mean Toronto Annex. That's me. Vancouver Island. Welcome. Fantastic. Well, yeah. So, we're represented across the country, and I haven't seen anyone international yet, but who knows? There are more joining, I believe. So welcome. We're going to talk solo theater. I was asked to make this personal, not about the nuts and bolts of making a show, but I'm happy to answer any sort of practical or logistical questions that you might have. You can post them in the chat, as David said, as they occur to you, or hold them, but they'll be passed on, or you'll get a chance to ask at a couple of points in this evening. We have a notion with Shakespeare in Action to begin a class in solo show creation, and we'll take a poll at the end, see if some of you are interested in joining such a thing. For now, I'm going to focus on my journey as a creator and performer of solo work, what I've learned from the practice of making and disseminating solo work. I have created 4 one-person shows that altogether I've performed about 300 times in festivals and theaters in Canada, around the world, from the little Thespis Festival in Northern Germany to the National Theatre of Iceland, to South Africa's National Arts Festival and Edinburgh on 3 occasions. These 4 shows that I have been involved in creating were made in 4 very different ways. One, interpretation. That's in the case of Alphonse by Wajdi Mouawad. There's adaptation. That would apply to Kafka Unsung, which was adapted from a literary work. The third is embodiment, where a concert sort of performance was made into a dynamic theatrical event by embodying it. And the fourth is collective creation, and a sort of pure creation where there was no play, there was no text, and we created it together. That would apply to Hirsch, co-created by myself and Paul Thompson. Now, in retrospect, there is a relationship of this sequence of creative methods which mirrors my evolving maturity, my development as an actor, and you could say playwright. I got better at sequencing, storytelling, making a story sing, taking responsibility for the entire experience. I became more confident as an artist, and this confidence, through doing solo work, filtered back into my other work as a gigging actor in theater and film. And that's a point I want to make so strongly, that this is empowering work. I'm going to go through the process of making and performing these 4 solo shows in short form, in a sense. I'm going to offer a few videos, a few other little visual examples of things. And in the process, I'm going to focus on 2 main themes. There's the relationship with collaborators, which is key. You're never doing this alone, or I haven't found a way to do it all alone. And the other is relationship with the audience, which is particularly refined and significant in the world of solo work, I think. Finally, I'm going to offer a few secret ingredients for successful solos. I really hope that you come out of this with a more refined lens through which to watch solo work, and an appreciation of why one-person shows are a powerful mode of theater making. But if I've been successful, you will feel compelled and empowered to make your own solo work, if you haven't done so already. I'm just wondering, who here actually has made solo work, or I think we're going to put up a little poll here. Oh yeah, there we go. Have you ever created, performed a solo show before? Long, short, produced, or just in the top drawer, closet, or shower? Very good. Yeah, so that's great. Yeah. Good. Phenomenal, phenomenal. Yeah. So let's see. That's good. That's good. This is useful information, and it's great that there's so many people here who have jumped into this game already. So you'll see if my experiences jive with yours. You'll see if some ideas emerge from what I'm talking about that you can apply to your own work. But in order to get to the question of why solo shows are great and totally worth making, I have to tell you why I used to hate solo shows. Really. From my youngest days, when I participated in many plays at summer camp and school, I could feel like viscerally the way a good show would uplift and transform a community. The theater I saw and participated in always involved large groups of people. And it was these multiple interactions with theater colleagues, all the little intimacies and tensions that theater engenders, which I associated with the power of the art form. Making theater was a barn raising with all the cooperation and cohesion that implies. In theater school, I learned all about tuning into others, passing the ball back and forth, putting your intention on the other person, creating conflict on stage. And this all implied multiple performers, at least two, in order for something authentically theatrical to arise. I was deeply suspicious of what were called at that time, when I was in school, one-man shows. It seemed that having one person drone on for an hour or more was more closely aligned to the lecture hall than the theater. Why would anyone pay to watch one person try to create a world or inhabit a drama? Or more to the point, why would any theater artist want to do a solo other than as a response to financial constraints? It is cheap and relatively easy to tour a solo show on the fringe circuit. And now solo shows could be regaining popularity because they're COVID friendly, socially distanced and all. But these are sort of negative virtues. My first experience of seeing this sort of theater more or less confirmed my suspicion. As a young teen, I saw Henry Fonda in Clarence Darrow for the Defense. Henry Fonda was a very famous actor at that time and the father of a few more famous actors. But this solo about the lawyer, Clarence Darrow, featured Mr. Fonda standing at a lectern, reciting a chronological list of legal events without any action or drama. It was a star turn, probably a good payday for him, but deserving of the worst put down I can think of for any theater piece, dull. I was more impressed with Lily Tomlin, who some of you may remember and know from her more recent work on and Grace, in a play called Search for Signs of Intelligent Life in the Universe. Tomlin touched on huge ideas, but also took on that virtuosic trick of creating a constellation of characters, seemingly in conversation with each other to a very high level. There were times when I could have sworn that there was a collection of people on stage. But it was still one person jumping from place to place, begging the question of why, but for economy, was it better to have one person do this than a company of separate actors? What was the first solo show you saw? I'm just wondering. Let's invoke some of those early solo vibes. Maybe just your favorite TED Talk. But yeah. What are some of the shows that you see? Yeah, Monster, phenomenal. Claudia is seminal. Yeah. L. Martin, love his work. And the Rod Beatty, phenomenal, unforgettable. Yeah. Oh my goodness, Alan Cummings. Swimming to Cambodia, I saw that live. Did somebody else see that live in New York or somewhere? Yeah. Carrie, phenomenal. Well, yeah. Okay, so Actually, I've seen some of those artists, and I'm going to mention some other ones that I've seen who really expanded the genre, and the possibility of the one-person show. There's To Be Young, Anit Africa, Kristen Thompson. Many of you have mentioned Daniel McIver, of course, Pamela Sinha, Ken Campbell, out of England, a phenomenal, eccentric, wild man, who did a 3-hour show called the History of Comedy, Part 1, Ventriloquism. That was phenomenal. Ngozi Paul, TJ Daw, Tamisha Harris, Ian McKellen, and Mamale Niamze, Mamala, in South Africa, phenomenal dancer and storyteller. Even though, let's say, my sense of the capacity of really groundbreaking, phenomenal work on a solo level was there, I was scared. I wasn't sure if I was one of those who could pull it off. Did I have that stamina, the concentration, the physical and mental dexterity to do 60 minutes or 75 or 90 minutes? In the mid-90s, I was gigging as an actor, mostly on stage, trying to move incrementally towards the big time, which at that time, in my mind, meant the small but mighty Tarragon past Mirail and Factory in Toronto, or the large and impenetrable Canadian stage, Stratford and Shaw. That was my constellation. One of my most inspiring friends at that time was Wajdi Mouawad. We had been on parallel tracks in theater school, him on the French side, me on the English, but there were moments when we did contact improv together or ended up watching each other's work or hanging out at the brasserie. He was emerging in the 90s as a phenomenal playwright and director, as well as performer. And Wajdi had written a solo show for himself based on stories that he had made up while walking between Montreal and Quebec City, stopping in each village, offering stories in exchange for food and lodging. This play, called Alphonse, was being translated by another friend, Shelley Tepperman, and I read an early draft. It spoke to me on so many levels, as a celebration of the imagination, as an affirmation of what I had chosen to dedicate myself to. It came into my life as I was looking for a challenge and a way to self-actualize, to move beyond the dynamic of waiting for a director to grant me the permission to do what I loved. So I gathered a team, signed up for the Toronto Fringe, and dug deeply into that text. I found an outdoor space, a playground within a courtyard where I could involve myself in the many elements of play and whimsy that the text demanded. Alphonse is a classic tour de force sort of solo. There are 27 distinct characters, including a talking cave, a royal vacuum cleaner. It demands virtuosity, navigating hairpin turn transitions, creating many worlds populated by humans of all ages and genders, as well as fantastical beings. Oh, and there's an outrageous popcorn rainstorm. I call Alphonse a work of interpretation. At that time, I could not imagine myself as a writer. I was happy to find an existing text that I could give myself to and fly with. And fly I did, quite literally. There were poles to climb and platforms and rooftops to swing between. I think I broke a few equity safety rules, but since I was the producer and the director, as well as the actor, extreme risks were permissible. The Toronto Fringe production was a one-of-a-kind, site-specific version, unrepeatable because that space was completely renovated a year later. That was 2000. Since then, I have performed Alphonse about 100 times in various versions, including a gorgeous rendition with Theatre Direct in 2002, another outdoor version in Dufferin Grove Park, and a touring version, which I took to Edinburgh and South Africa. This past summer, I returned to the work as something that I knew was possible during the summer of COVID in city parks for family audiences as a tiny toe in the water of live performance. The best part of this most recent production was working with Caleb Alexander, an actor I knew from a season of Shakespeare in Hyde Park, and who had the full mental, physical dexterity to undertake that in many roles of this play. With Caleb acting and me directing, there was the opportunity to dig deeper, to explore the ways that the text resonated in a different body, to bring out aspects of the script that I never fully explored before. I knew from early on that Alphonse is in part a reflection of Wajdi's experience as an imaginative and misunderstood immigrant boy, a Quebecer from Lebanon by way of France. Caleb conveyed this through body and voice in some really impressive ways. I'm going to show you a little bit of video from this summer, just to get a taste of, oh boy, I gotta do this first. Just to get a taste of what Caleb brought to this show. All right, now, share screen. Okay, boom. We're learning as we go here, okay. Let's see. Okay. Well, that's not good. To set this up, all right. Alphonse, as I say, very imaginative boy. He tells endless stories, and this is going to be one of them, telling to his best buddy, Walter. Well, there you go. It's all lined up.
While we're waiting, perhaps I can just open up the floor to any questions that have come up just as we started for Alon, based on the first method, interpretation.
Okay. Let me see if I've got this going. Huh. Let's see if I redo this.
This is theater, folks. This is live.
I know. Well, I'm not going to give this a lot of time, but let me give it one more.
Afternoon, everyone.
Okay. Sorry, folks. Okay.
Afternoon, everyone.
You gotta ditch these guys. So I decided.
Wait, Alon, would you be able to share the screen with us?
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. This is just a little tasty poo, but let's make it happen now. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Caleb Alexander, he's sort of mid-story here. I'll take it back just a couple of inches. Okay, there we go.
I said to myself, Alphonse, you gotta ditch these guys. So I decided to climb into a boat. There, in the boat, there were all these sailors lying down. They were sleeping. One woke up. He had tattoos up to his eyeballs. The skinny guy showed up, and then a fight broke out. Going at each other like you wouldn't believe. I'm gonna beat each other up. So last night, I ended up sleeping on the sofa. No way. He would have bags under his eyes. I believed him, and I worried. But I know now that they were just stories that he told, but I mean, that's what he was like. You would lie awake all night to think up these incredible stories and tell me in the morning. And you know, I'd ask them, well, Franz, who the hell gets in you running around at night like that?
All right, folks. Yeah, just a little taste. I mean, you can see how exhausting the show is, but it gets into extreme poetry and delicate beauty. I think you also heard in the background kids playing. There was a playground and a wading pool right next to the performance area. And that was just part of the fun of performing in the park. But it was actually beautiful because a lot of the kids stopped their play or their swimming and watched the show. So that's, you know, just a little taste of the production in Dufferin Grove Park this summer. Okay. Okay, so that is one way to make a solo show. I found a playwright that I love, a story that I wanted to share, and took responsibility for making it happen. And that involves delving deeply into the text, coming up with your unique take on it, inviting collaborators who inspire you. In this case, got it into a Fringe, or you know, you can pick some other easily accessible venue and go for it. You know, there are solo shows out there, so many, you know, that are excellent. Go for it. Now, making a good solo can take years, as some of you know, and that was the case with Kafka and Son. This was a work of adaptation. Mark Cassidy, a brilliant director with whom I had done a theatricalization of Allen Ginsberg's masterpiece, Howl, brought another piece of literature to my attention. This was the monumental letter Franz Kafka wrote to his father. Kafka, a Czech Jewish writer who wrote in German during the first 2 decades of the last century, was trying to understand why he was such a complete failure at work, as a writer, in his relationships, as a son. He attributed most of the blame to his overbearing father. The letter exists as a tortured attempt to clear the air with his father while, in a certain sense, polluting it at the same time. It's a crazy, legal, poetic, tragic, and, to my mind, hilarious text. The letter has an inherently dramatic structure. Franz conjures his father, putting words in his mouth, until, by the end, the father dominates and destroys all of Franz's arguments. I loved it, of course. Mark and I set out on a multi-year journey to adapt the letter to the stage. We met once a week for 2 years, shaving the text down to 1/3 its size, breaking it into 18 potent episodes, reading everything we could get our hands on by and about Kafka, working with a designer who brought elements into our meetings. One week we played with barbed wire, next with rusted dog cages, then with feathers or stones or reams of paper. We found elements over time which seemed most resonant, always whittling down to the most essential in terms of text or image. We found music by the Argentinian-American composer Osvaldo Golichov and played by the St. Lawrence String Quartet, which was inspired by Kafka's writing and fit the environment that we were creating. And eventually we brought in the great lighting designer, Andrea Lundy, who made everything look stark and expressionistic, like an early black and white silent movie. Okay, I'm going to try to bring up a video. Let's see if it's going to go. Yeah, okay. Ça marche. So I'm going to share the screen with you. Da-da-da. And make it big. And there we go. This is a little promo that we made 10 years ago for the first Edinburgh run of Kafka and Son.
outside before the people. You holding me by my hand, a little skeleton, who have only proved to me that all my reproaches were justified.
Whoa. All right. This is a picture that is good. Okay, yeah. So as you can see, I was playing both the father and the son, sort of schizophrenic undertaking, but absolutely in keeping with the intent of the letter. Both characters are the product of one mind. Franz had no interest in presenting an objective picture of his father. The father is very much Franz's version of him. That's why it's absolutely essential in a certain sense to do this as a solo show. The show was presented at a couple of festivals in Toronto where it got some fine, respectful 3-star reviews, the sort which kill any hope of ticket sales or a future for the play, at least by the Toronto rules. And this is where I want to underline a key aspect of solo performance. As some of you may know, there's no one else up there with you. The show is going to ride on your belief in yourself and the work, your insistence that what you are doing is necessary, impactful, worth doing. Kafka and Son taught me stick with itness. You must not believe the naysayers or the blah-sayers. We continue to refine and shape the play, sharpening its intentions, making it more intense and squirmy for the audience. I call it a feel-bad play. And we took it on the road across Canada on the fringe circuit. It was not your typical fringe fare, but we found an audience for it and brought the people willing to take the journey into a profound encounter with their own parents or children, with authority figures, with the state apparatus, or with their own personal all-powerful God. I was traveling with my family at that time, everyone and everything packed into and on top of our minivan. That summer tour of 2007 was a peak experience. Enthusiasm for that show cascaded from Montreal through Ottawa, Toronto, Winnipeg, Saskatoon, to the point that on the day that we arrived in Edmonton, we were greeted with 2 5-star reviews before we had done anything. The play was sold out by the end of the first weekend, and that fringe tour begat an invitation to the National Theatre of Iceland that was doing a production of The Metamorphosis, and they wanted it sort of a parallel Kafka creation, which begat a run at the Edinburgh Fringe, and which begat a European tour, which begat an invitation to South Africa's National Arts Festival. In 2017, I did Kafka and Son for the 3rd time in Edinburgh, sold out every performance, and was invited to do it off-Broadway. 2 days before closing, the great theater journal, The Stage, sent a reviewer, and this is what they printed on the last day of the festival. Oh, goodness gracious. I'm gonna make this happen, don't worry. I don't know if you can read that. Yeah. So I was hoisted on my own petard there. I mean, at this point, we were closing already. But, you know, you can't please all of the people all of the time. I just want to say that obviously it brought me down, but you can't believe the reviews, good or bad. Reviews need to be categorized as useful or useless, and this one was clearly useless. Let them give you a lift if you deign to read them. Many people don't, but don't let them deter you. Tame that voice of the overbearing father. So again, this was a work of literary adaptation. Kafka and Son felt personal, and I completely identified with Kafka as a struggling artist and a person buffeted by forces out of his control, and as a somewhat frail Jewish man myself. The best thing about touring the show has been the opportunity to see how it means different things to different audiences, to see it morph according to the spaces it inhabited. For example, in Turkey, where it is very dangerous to criticize the president, people found in the family dynamics of the play an opportunity to talk about a strong man bullying the people. In South Africa, the indigenous Afrikaans, and the Indian cultures, they all are struggling with toxic masculinity, and that's why the show was invited there. And domineering fathers, that's a recurring theme. In Germany, the show became a metaphor for, in a way, the Jewish people and the Vaterland, the fatherland, reaching towards each other to find healing, unable or struggling to express their love for each other. I may have to retire this play soon. The Kafka who wrote this letter is about 25 years younger than me, but it's still a mountain I love to climb, even if the journey is full of shame and going into powerlessness, which can leave me feeling devastated. All right, on that happy note, let's take a few minutes for questions.
So as I've mentioned, yeah, feel free to either come onto your microphone to ask some questions. Just feel free to introduce yourself if you do, or type the question in the chat and I can read it. If no questions come, I have a question myself. So, but I'll leave the space open. How do you afford to work on a play for 2 years? Like, where do you, what kind of, how do you make that happen? Just, how do you find the time? How do you find the money? How did you, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that obviously that wasn't the only thing I was doing in those 2 years. We'd meet on Mondays. I mean, I forget what I was doing else, but there would have been, some other shows that I was hired to do. I think, what we have in our granting systems, probably the most consistent support when you're not part of a big organization for play development. And there is money to be found. Recommender grants, all of the arts councils have grants related to play development. It's best to go in with something already written, with something that has even some kind of workshop behind it. But yeah, we were doing that work in a sense pro bono between other things, and but it did allow for that process to really seep in, and yeah. So, I mean, right now we're in COVID times. There won't be anything on stage inside for a while, so it's a good time to take that. Take the time to really develop something slowly, carefully, and I found that once a week meeting super useful, because there was a lot of time to consider and read between our meetings.
Cool. And some questions are coming in. I'll just start with the first one. What kind of outreach do you do as a producer with that show? I'm assuming Kafka and Sons. Did you have to network a lot at these festivals that you're at?
Yeah, I think that's it's something I alluded to that I took on the role of producer and sometimes director. And it does mean wearing a couple of hats that can be contradictory. But yeah, there's always networking to be done. One of the things, as some of you may know, that if fringes can happen again, there is a kind of carny atmosphere there, and you do connect with other people who are doing this, and they become a kind of support network and friends, who have ideas and recommendations, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely, that's a kind of network that I found very supportive, and beautiful. Friendships came out of solo fringe touring. And there's a lot, that with the press and with other producing entities. I've tried to create alliances with different theaters to make a play, and that's what they're there for. So it's not like it was a strange thing. So there's a lot to that producing aspect of things, and it's probably a nuts and bolts thing that I would get into in more detail, and collect more organized thoughts about for a course.
Yeah. There are a couple of questions coming through. So I'm taking all these questions, I'm putting them into a document. I think maybe we have time for maybe one more question now, and I'll try to circle back on some of the other questions, see if there's relation to additional questions that are coming in.
Okay.
And if we don't get to your question, let's promise I'll shoot these questions to Alon, and we can share it with the answers, maybe short written answers with the event list after this. But I'll just go with the next one, which is, can you talk about getting the rights, finding and getting the rights for the use of the letter
Right.
for Kafka and Son?
Yeah. Okay. Such a good question. I don't want to get myself into any trouble here. I mean, basically, there are a number of translations, and those are the issues when it comes to rights. But what we ended up doing was interpolating from fiction, from diaries, and rewriting it essentially. So it's all the letter, but there's not a single sentence that is directly taken from a particular translation. So we did not formally, create a relationship with any of the translators on this one, and rights is an issue with other shows. I mean, for Alphonse, of course, I'm paying Wajdi's agent and the translator royalties every time I've done it, and with other work that I've done, there are certain acknowledgements and different kind of rights arrangements. But when speaking of Kafka and Son, that's what we did, and that's why we have not paid rights on that show.
Awesome. A lot of great questions coming through the chat. Maybe a few may be answered. I'm looking at this last big one. May be answered in an upcoming in your upcoming points. But if not, I'll circle back anyway. So why don't I? No, it's so great.
Okay. Okay. Very cool. Excellent. Excellent. So I'm going to continue here at your prodding here. Okay. Yeah. Actually, you know what? Maybe I'll just take a look at that long question again about Kafka. Insist on taking on big stuff. Okay. Parents' authority. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this question about how personal, how confessional, et cetera, how to make it. Fantastic question. I am going to get to my thoughts about that as we go. And so let's circle back to that at the end and see if I've addressed it. All right. So in 2006, I was invited to the Banff Center for the Arts to develop a theatrical version of Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen, as arranged for string quartet and narrator by Canadian composer Patrick Cardy. I am going to show you a page of the text for this, or the score. All right, here we go. Please. Just to give you a sense. Boom. Boom. Okay. So this existed as a concert event, which was done in a pretty stiff way, with the narrator standing at a music stand, string quartet over there, and it was being read. But you can see why. It's devilish. There is text, and then, like you can see here at the bottom of the page, there are a bunch of these arrows, boom, boom, boom. That means that word should be spoken at that beat of that bar. Boom. And on it goes, with this kind of beep, And so coordinating all of this with the string quartet just takes time, and memorizing it is quite a task, because I have to memorize the text and also the music. But it's really cool, to the extent that I can get it. And, so it's worth taking that time. I did the piece the first time as, a concert in a traditional way with the St. Lawrence String Quartet. Very great string quartet. I have a very funny anecdote from that first experience. We had to spend so much time lining up the text and the music, and we repeated it again and again. I was so afraid of losing my voice. So I kept drinking water, bottle after bottle. And then eventually, of course, I had to pee. So we were in this grand Ottawa church with a beautiful tiled bathroom. And as my bladder continued to discharge the full afternoon of drinking, I did not realize that my mic was still on. When I came back into the grand auditorium, I was told by the quartet, once they caught their breath, that it sounded in the sanctuary there like Niagara Falls. In any case, I did rise again from that embarrassment to realize a vision that I had, to take it off the page, to get the quartet involved in the action. So I call this a work of embodiment. I consider myself an embodied actor. I don't know if this is an official term, but I think you could see in Kafka and Son that I like to physicalize. I often unlock a character's physicality first, finding the way that they hold their shoulder blades or their buttocks, or how they stand or walk or scratch or breathe. I draw on my training in clown and mime and contact improv, as well as all the, the method and all the rest of it. The Snow Queen is full of these characters, human and otherwise, who are begging to be physicalized. From the young protagonist, Gerda, to her best friend, Kay, an old magic woman, a crow, a reindeer, and then the Snow Queen herself. I coaxed the musicians away from their music stands to play a river, a sorcerer, horses pulling a sleigh, and the young protagonist, Gerda. The quartets that I've worked with have always had a great time acting. Again, Andrea Lundy worked with me on this show, adding video that delicately augments the story with images. And there's a simple transportable set, which consists mostly of reams of white fabric representing an endless expanse of snow. Okay. Over the course of this little excerpt, you're going to see the Cecilia String Quartet perform that sleigh ride scene, and you'll watch them transform as the video continues into horses pulling the sleigh. Very cool. Hello, hello. Oh, there we are. Boom.
One winter's afternoon, Kay stole off alone with his sled to the big square where the Boulder boys used to tie their sleds behind farmers' carts and be dragged gleefully around the streets. Kay joined in the middle of their games and tied his sled behind a large white sleigh, driven by a woman clothed in white fur who nodded and smiled at him as if she knew him. They drove faster and faster through the square, and Kay screamed with delight as they raced over the frozen streets. The snow began to fall, at first slowly, then more and more heavily, until Kay could no longer see the square through the impenetrable white. He began to feel frightened, but the driver nodded and smiled at him. The white sleigh circled still faster. Then, slowly leaving the ground, it passed through the city gates and sped like the wind through the storm. Kay cried and tried to loose his sled, but his screams trailed after him into the unending snow, and his fingers grew numb in the icy wind. The driver turned, ever slowing the pace of the magical sleigh, and drew Kay up to her. His eyes raised. He beheld the face of the most beautiful woman imaginable. She wrapped him in her furs. She touched her lips to his forehead. And Kay no longer felt the cold of the biting wind as they flew into the white night to the distant palace of the Snow Queen.
Okay. Whoa. Okay. Yes. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing doesn't have that kind of drive, but it's that kind of coordinating. I've done it with 4 different string quartets across Canada. My dream now is to do it with a performer from Canada's north who can recontextualize the story, perhaps augment it with a story from their own tradition. This is, a very Eurocentric version of the North. And, I just wonder how that might relate to a very Canadian version and a very, here version of the North. Obviously, this is a show which tries to integrate a solo actor into a musical event, while at the same time bringing the musical performers into the storytelling. So, it's not exactly a solo. I very much wanted the musicians to be very present, but I'm a huge fan of live music, and I love to incorporate music and relate to music in all of the solo shows that I've done. And it is much more than accompaniment. It's another character. And like any character on stage, I allow the music to affect me, to frighten me, to comfort me, it's always a partnership. So that was a case of embodying an existing work of performance art, another avenue to solo work, taking what previously maybe was a political speech or concert or radio play, giving it solo theatrical life. With the previous work under my belt and with increasing confidence, I finally entered into the process of pure creation. The play was called Hirsch, and it was collectively created by me and Paul Thompson, the legendary Paul Thompson of the Farm Show, pioneer director in the early days of Theatre Passe Muraille, one of the truly original theater makers of our country. His technique involves research conducted over many months, sometimes over many years. Anyone who's seen The Drawer Boy knows something of this methodology, because that was a play about the creation of the Farm Show to some extent. The research gets distilled into improvised scenes, which get written down by a scribe, and then reworked through more improvisation and then research, and then finally shaping, editing, writing. It's a glorious and maddening way to make a play. For Hirsch, which is about the life and the theater of John Hirsch, another legendary director. I had the honor of speaking to many people who had worked with him. So my research included talking to people who are still active in Stratford or some who are on Broadway today. I spoke to actors like Len Cariou, Shauna McKenna, Martha Henry, Brian Bedford, directors such as Daniel Sullivan, Miles Potter. Paul and I and various scribes worked in the mystical zone of rehearsal room 1 upstairs in the Festival Theatre in Stratford, usually when no one else was around, like late December. Paul would provoke and prod me to explore each episode more deeply. I'd come back in the middle of the night to revise the text and then do another improv based on my rewrite the next day. We were a collective of 2, but still, this is the great Canadian way of making a play. I have a little interview with Paul that I can show you folks. That'll just give you a taste of us working together. And cool.
My name is Paul Thompson. I'm the director and co-creator of Hirsch.
And my name is Alon Nashman, and I am a co-creator and a performer of Hirsch. Well, the man himself was a colossus who strode the culture of this country, who was an originator and original, somebody who kickstarted 5 theaters within his first 10 years in this country. That is half the story, his career. The other important half is that he started life as a Holocaust refugee, as somebody who lost his entire family. And as a kid, as a teenager, he wandered through Europe after the war, trying to find a home.
I happened to be here when he was co-artistic director with Jean Gascon, and some of his early productions shaped the direction I took at theater. Beautiful heart, huge passion for theater. In fact, I think that's, for me, the centerpiece of the play is the necessity of passion for art and how that is more than a calling, it's a survival mechanism and a cultural need.
Just so happens that Paul Thompson shares those values and that intensity.
Well, I think he brainwashed me, probably. Alon was acting in a show in Toronto called Scorched, fantastic show at Tarragon.
Okay.
And I saw him in the show and I said, yes, this is John Hirsch.
Well, there you have it. So cool. You know, I got picked out of the chorus line. We explored and, you know, the question of my suitability for that role and the legitimacy for me to tell the story actually came up. We would start each day acknowledging John Hirsch, like welcoming his presence into the room to watch our exploration. And then one day during an improv, I jumped out of the performance area, and as Hirsch, I began to castigate myself for ruining his story. He was calling me boring, predictable. I mean, I was calling myself that, you know, not theatrical enough, not the way that he would do it, dull. I started defending myself, arguing with Hirsch, and he walked out of the room. And that's how I became a character in the play. My adoration and disgust with Hirsch, my own struggles to find a home in the theater, to raise a young Jewish family in the shadow of the Holocaust, you know, somehow that all became part of the play. You know, I have a video of that section where Hirsch turns on me. So what the heck, I'll show you a little bit of that play in performance and share the screen once again.
Well, I took him up on the challenge. The theater got more people than the baseball. And we made sure he lost the next election. Still, we spent half our time begging just to stay alive. They say that theater must be profitable. Theater cannot make money anywhere. And this is an extremely foolish, stupid, and idiotic kind of an attitude to expect theaters to make money. Do the public schools make money? Do the libraries make money? Does the zoo make money? Does the sewers make money? It's an essential community service. And what is this doing here? We've had the same stage picture for the past 20 minutes. Move this stupid thing, my God. I can't trust you to capture any of this. That's Winnipeg. One jokey song. There was more to Winnipeg. Yes, much more. Inspired a generation of artists, created the first regional theater in North America. Yes, it was absolute bedlam, complete madness, but we were floating, not coming down to earth. It was an ecstatic moment. Tina Turner at full tilt. You should have seen me at the cast parties. Ooh! Yeah! You call that dancing? Was that supposed to be emblematic? Do you want to know why I'm colder than a witch's tit? Do you want to know why this experiment isn't working? Because you don't understand one iota of what I have gone through. So it might be great for you jerking off here, and this is an insult for my life. Your intellect is nothing compared to my intellect. And I'm not bragging, I'm just observing. If you think this is cheating, suck it up. You'll never get the truth about my life. You'll never. Go ahead, talk to Margaret Henry. No, you don't deserve it. It's the real story of John Herschel and my body. My body is the theater of Canada, and no one can make no one can make my life into some footnote, some interesting blip. When I gave everything of my life to make this. So when someone has the idea to make a play of a real fucking story of theater in Canada, then they'll make my story. This little fly-by-night operation, it's no help from me! Sorry. The star of the show just walked out on me. Excuse me. That's not very nice. I'm not nice. I don't want to be nice. And all this audience interaction is making me nauseous. Leave them alone, get up on the stage and do your job.
Oh my, oh my. We're going to get there. Boop. That's a little taste of Hirsch. So this type of play in which the text is pulled out of yourself through the act of embodied creation is very popular. Often it can involve what I call, and what other people call, confessional elements, i.e. partially reveal a true story that you've experienced. Some wonderful plays were built this way. I can think, Kristen Thompson's I, Claudia, she developed doing mask work in front of a mirror, drawing on her own life, but, repatterning it and making a mythological story. Pamela Sinha's shattering Crash, to be young Anit Africa's solo shows, a trio of them, starting with Blood Clot. She is a great teacher, by the way, of finding your voice and your purpose as a creator, and I highly recommend looking out for her Surplusi technique. She's teaching, I think, at Soul Pepper in their academy, but she occasionally does workshops, and they're very much worth taking. We debuted Hirsch at the Studio Theater, Stratford, and it was a big deal, especially for the people who had worked with Hirsch. They thought they were seeing a ghost. Among them was Maggie Smith, who came to see the show in Stratford. You know, it was a great time for me. New York Times reviewed it. But that would have been the end if I had not insisted on doing it again, making it available elsewhere. We kind of simplified it and took it to Edinburgh, Winnipeg, Vancouver, and it's also traveled to a couple of festivals in South Africa. There's a great director and playmaker in South Africa, Barney Simon, son of Jewish immigrants, who invigorated the culture of his country by founding the first non-racial theater, Johannesburg's Market Theater. I had the opportunity when I went there to see some of Simon's groundbreaking work, which is similar to the collective creation method of Paul Thompson. So that was the journey from interpretation to adaptation to embodiment to collective creation. Over the course of the past 2 decades, I have come to appreciate that the solo performer is a sort of shaman, harnessing and transforming the energy in the room. The solo performer takes full responsibility for the audience's experiences, and that involves immense focus and concentration. The soloist cannot hide. There is an element of self-revelation, which most theater does not demand. The solo performer is all in. There is no break. It is a completely demanding, usually depleting exercise. Often feels like an act of endurance, an impossibility. The audience watches, I believe, with one eye on the story and the characters and one eye on the performer. The performer is always present in solo work. And part of the mystery is how the performer will navigate this kind of ordeal. And when we get the balance right, it can seem as if the performer is inviting the audience to jump off a cliff together with him or her. And all that the freedom and the risk that implies. As you can tell, I came around to love and respect the virtuosity of solo work and its potential to agitate and ignite an audience. I love the French word bouleversant to describe solo work. It has the potential to bouleverser, to turn people upside down. As a soloist, I feel that I'm holding the soul of each audience member in my hands and trying to give it a little turn, perhaps even a full 180. Can this show cause someone to consider some element of existence completely opposite to how they thought when they arrived? That relationship with the audience becomes the dramatic relationship of a solo show. The soloist may have inanimate allies on stage. I mean, the lights and the sound can act as other characters, as I've said, but it is this back and forth with the audience, even a certain tension with the audience, which adds dynamic to solo shows. Give the audience a role to play. Cast them as the jury or your followers or your lover. I often take a somewhat adversarial position when it comes to the audience. I don't want to assume their agreement, but rather that I cast them as people who are suspicious of me. I need to win them over, enlighten them, or enlist them. At the same time, there is a way in which the audience and solo performer are lovers, breathing together, opening to each other. The soloist has to listen to the audience closely. There is no one else to listen to. The audience has to be present to what is being offered. I demand extreme involvement from the audience, while of course remaining wholly forgiving. I don't tolerate coughing or fidgeting. I know that when the play and the performance are sharp and no one dares, those moments, no one dares to cough or move. Sometimes even breathing is suspended. It's riveting. Another word I love. I'm looking for that rivet, that crackle of charged air, intensity. Something extraordinary is taking place. Okay, that's a lot about a lot of solo work. 4 shows made in 4 different ways: interpretation, adaptation, embodiment, creation. In every case, I not only performed, but also insisted on performing it again and again. Pick your method, but you can do it, and there are many rewards. And at this point, let's go back to questions.
Sure, and feel free to type some questions in the chat or just go on your mic and ask them. But there are some lingering questions from before. From the first to the last run, are there a lot of big changes to the script? Yeah.
From the first performance
To the last performance.
yeah.
With any given show.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, Kafka and Son, I've probably done the most. And what's interesting is that, yeah, I mean, I'm always looking at the script again, and but that one hasn't changed so much in its text. It's more what's going on in my head. So the father, even when he's not speaking, is on stage all the time. Sometimes he's, I place him up above. This is work that I did with the director, Mark Cassidy. But the motion and the reality of that other character has gotten sharper and sharper in my mind as time goes on. Sometimes he's under the bed, he's hiding. Sometimes he's right over my shoulder and, terrifying me in that way. Or so yeah. I think that the great thing about returning to work is that capacity, that permission to refine. And yeah, certainly with Alphonse, I worked on the translation. I just feel very, very intimate with that play as well. And certain just little phrases have changed over time, and for the sake of clearer storytelling or character. So yeah, I would say there's this rare phenomenal opportunity when it's just you, and you get to redo it, to rethink it all the time. Okay, what else?
The latter 3 processes had a director. From my understanding, the first one, you were the director and Alphonse and the performer. Jane asked, how much can you accomplish before working with a director?
Yeah. I mean, I think having a director, an outside eye, is absolutely crucial. When I did Alphonse, I had a very clear idea of how to animate that script, but I invited Mike Kennard, the great clown and clown teacher, to watch me a number of times and feedback. So he was a creative consultant or something like that, but he definitely took the role of that outside eye. So my sense is that you need somebody out there. Sometimes it's that prodding is absolutely essential, and sometimes it's sometimes you just need hand holding and that sort of thing. But I've also been inclined to think like a director, that I've got a little video camera in my head, out there, which when I'm in a show with other people, I try to turn that off as much as possible. But I have some curiosity about directing, and sometimes I apply that to myself. And I encourage you, if you have that inclination, to give that a try as well. Yeah, next question.
And Samantha, I wonder if you feel like this was answered, but I'm going to go back to it, which is, how do we insist on talking about big stuff in our solo shows? You were saying that Kafka was about parents, authority, God. How did you scaffold or layer these things? And I've been finding that in making a solo show, there's an expectation from peers that it should be confessional or about just my experience. That's something that I've heard a lot too.
Yeah. I mean, but I think they're just a far cry from write what you know to it has to be confessional, that's an option. And I've seen some fantastic confessional monologues. But let's face it, the best of them is not just a straight retelling of what happened. It's beautiful because it's been toyed with quite a bit, and I think that I mean, I'm generalizing, but I think that you've got great source material in your own life, accomplishments and rejections and shames and crazy ass adventures, and bring that into the process, but don't feel confined by that either. Certainly, in the case of Alphonse, Wajdi was drawing upon his experience, but also flights of fancy, and that's the free reign for the imagination is also so crucial to the writer.
Other questions, please feel free. I have a couple more bubbling in my head after that, but either in the chat or on your mic.
I'm going to come in with another question, except for I'm going to speak at this time. In terms of like the imagination and flights of fancy, I think I'm wondering, how do you manage dreaming big versus practicality of touring? Because we say this is like an easy form for touring, but then when your ideas are so large, it can be hard to wonder if maybe you should suppress them for practicality's sake, especially these days, right? Where it's like, well, I'm either doing it outside or I'm doing it on Zoom or I'm doing it as a YouTube live stream. You know what I mean? Like just trying to navigate that world of what I dream of and what I can do.
Well, I mean, you raise a number of really good questions and issues there. I've always been so jealous of the comics who have, the stool, the mic, and the water bottle. I'm lugging props and things and making magic. The popcorn rainstorm is like, no, it's got to be there. I don't know exactly what you mean by dreaming big, but one of the things that we have to acknowledge is that there won't be touring internationally for a while. And I think the word touring and disseminating material is going to mean something very different. I think it's going to be much more local and regional. I mean, I don't know, of course, what's going to be happening, but I feel as if the ancient equations of theater, where we draw a circle, where we still we tell stories around a campfire, that kind of thing, where communities gather, that's going to be increasingly something that we as creators and performers, we're going to animate that space, which is the local communal space, because people are going to be hungry for connection. That's what we're built for. And so yeah, I've seen a couple of shows on Zoom, and it's tough. It's tough for me to reach the heights that I have reached in the theater in terms of feeling. And it doesn't have to be a fancy theater; it could be a church basement, but it's in those spaces where we are, somehow sharing an experience in an energetic way that magic happens. Anyhow, I mean, never curtail your ideas, especially when you're writing. Make it impossible. Sometimes the way to convey that theatrically is so simple and not overbearing and expensive. So certainly don't curtail your dreams for the sake of practicality or economy. because that's what we have to do. I mean, and that relates to themes as well, you know, like go for, if you're inclined to tackle big issues, either political or emotional, you know, then I really think it's worth it. I really think, yeah, that not everybody's going to want intensity, but I think you're going to find your audience, sort of thing. I hope that that does address the things that you were asking.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and you then kind of addressed the other long question I posed also, so I appreciate that a lot.
Pleasure. Okay. Yeah. You know, we set aside 2 hours, but by no means do we have to fill them up. You know, I have a few more things I can say in terms of wrapping up, but I'm happy to take another question as well.
I'm thinking about the note of confessional, and I'm thinking this is maybe not a question, but a thought. You know, you were talking about the joy, or part of the joy of a solo show is one of the audience's eye is on, you know, the story and the make-believe character, and the other eye is on the performer, and where, how far those are apart and how close those are together based on how confessional a piece can feel. You know, sometimes I feel when a piece feels confessional, whether it is or not, the line between where my two eyes are watching, you know, the actor and the character at the same time, are getting too close for me, and, you know, can sometimes feel, you know, dangerous, or something like that. So that was just something that occurred to me as you shared that.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I mean, I obviously, if it feels as if it's the audience is being invited into a kind of personal therapy thing, and that the performer is not on top of the material in a certain, you know, I mean, sometimes it's a great conceit to pretend that you're really you're really in a horrible state because of X, Y, or Z. But I think the audience knows when it's uncomfortably dangerous, and when it is dramatically or, you know, theatrically dangerous. I mean, uncomfortably meaning that we're no longer in the theater. But, you know, I mean, honestly, I'm not. I'm not like critical of people who really play with that edge, and because sometimes that's just so moving too, and necessary. You know, I remember I talked about Ken Campbell, that 3-hour monologue about the history of comedy, ventriloquism. I mean, it's mad. He just speaks like at 1,000 miles a minute, and yeah, but at one point he came out of a bathtub, I think probably naked, but in any case, and he said, "This is it. This is, my life doesn't get better than this. So I hope you're enjoying yourself." And I really thought he meant it. You know, that is like, this is it for him. He's the most alive when he's between that bathtub and the lip of the stage, and I'm not going to argue with that. And it made for, you know, a perhaps sad, but definitely a potent moment. Yeah. Okay, folks. I'm gonna just say just a couple more things, and then we're gonna take a poll and see if there is interest in maybe creating solo work together. You know, that wasn't the point of this, but it'll be interesting to see. A couple of other little things that I've learned, and maybe I'm going to reiterate a few things here, but I believe at some point in this solo show that something ungraspable, something humanly impossible, either physically, emotionally, or spiritually, should happen. That there is a moment of transcendence. I mean, that is that's a theory I have. about what the theater, ought to offer. When it's just you and the audience, you need to have a strong bond with them, and sometimes adversarial is good. Sometimes loving is good, but involves intense listening and breathing together. I just be aware, for those of you who have not done this, that it can be a lonely road, that solo work can be isolating, and it's important to have buddies at arm's length, sometimes with you, or a support network that you can reach out to. Related to that question of confessional and very personal. Now, I've presented some different modes of making solo work and disseminating it as well. There are others, and you're going to find your own, or you found your own, collaborating with others and all the rest of it. And the point is, I encourage you to take that on. If you're inclined to do a solo work, now's a great time to be in development. And to that end, we're thinking, maybe someone wants to get involved in a 6-week course to help folks go deeper into this work. And let's take a little poll now to see who might be interested, or on what terms. Let me see. What does the poll say? Would you attend a sliding scale, pay what you can, or fixed price workshop series on creating your own solo? Okay, so you got a few options here. Yeah. So give that a thought. And as well, if you have questions arising from either the last things I've said or other aspects of the talk, you can post them in the chat, or email them to Shakespeare in Action. And happy to consider them and give you an answer from my humble perspective. Okay, great. Oh, there you go. There's an email in the chat for you to send questions to. That's terrific. Yeah. So bit of a consensus building around the class, and it might be worth thinking more seriously about this and reaching out to people for more. Okay. Oh, that's fun. That's a good question. How have we done? Okay, terrific.
50-50.
50-50. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's excellent. All right. Well, I mean, it's really been, oddly good for me to talk this through, to talk it out, to prepare myself for this, and to organize what was kind of chaotic. I just lived through different fascinations and processes, and so it's very odd talking to no one, but by the same token, I've done enough Zooms to know that there are people out there, and that people are understanding of the oddness of this forum. So, yeah, that's right. There it is. It hurts. The wall of Zoom silence. But I am so committed to finding ways to work within the safe limitations of our times, to find ways for us to gather, not to break rules, but to bend as far as we can, so that we can reassert that this is an essential service, that people need stories. They need to be able to hear each other's laughter and that sort of thing. So I leave you with that thought, hoping that we can gather sometime soon in a proper circle, and that before then we might gather, some of us, in a little bit of a dojo solo show creation. So thank you for joining us tonight. David, do you have any final words?
No, thank you so much for jumping on board. Please just a la Zoom wall of silence. If you want, come on video to say goodbye. It's been great hosting this, and Alon, thanks for taking the lead on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm reading some comments. It's lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you. Be well. Be well.
Awesome. Great to see your faces.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, great.
Oh, wow. Oh, this is so joyful.
Yeah, this is great. This makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah.
It happened. Okay. Be well. Be well. Only good things. Yeah.
Ciao.
Ciao.